Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I am Ryan Bowling. Thank you all for joining me. Larry Elder, whom you all know, has just come out with the sequel to Uncle Tom, which was a brilliant movie, by the way, brilliant documentary called Uncle Tom 2. And in this film, he has some scathing words to say about Black Lives Matter and how they are pushing a Marxist/communist ideology and using black people to do just that. So I'm going to read this article, and I'm going to read the very words that Larry Elder said in an interview, because it reflects what I have been saying for quite some time. You all know that I talk about communism and Marxism and socialism a lot of my videos, and that I believe that the left, the radical left, is basically a quiet form of communism. That they're not coming in with guns blazing like they did in the East, like they did in China, and like they did in Russia in the olden days. This is a soft, nonviolent form of communism, but the end is still the same. The end is to create a communist country. How do they do that? They use the concepts of Marxism, which is a divisive concept, a divisive ideology, to put groups and individuals and peoples and institutions against themselves in order to create a revolution or a war, and then the communists come in and fix it. They solve the problem that they created by creating a communist government. Let's hear what Larry Elder has to say about this. The Black Lives Matter campaign and enterprise is destroying what made America great and using blacks as a means to do so, Larry Elder, writer and executive producer of Uncle Tom 2, remarked on Thursday's edition of Sirius XM's Breitbart News Daily with host Alex Marlowe. Elder said his latest film details the political weaponization of race-based grievance, including, quote, white guilt, as a tool to undermine America by advancing communist ideology. Yep. Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. The co-founders of Black Lives Matter are self-described trained Marxists who do not believe in capitalism, Elder recall. Totally agree. They said that out of their own mouths, that they're trained Marxists. Most people that understand Marxism know what that leads to and know what that's all about. They want to bring down the American system as we know it. They want to bring down capitalism. Absolutely. They want government ownership of property, even as they're out buying mansions with the money that Patrisse Cullors described as, quote, white guilt money. Excuse me here. But that's her excuse. This is my comment. That's her excuse. Oh, I can use it because this is white guilt money. It's white guilt money. So I can go ahead and buy, expensive mansions and so forth. These people are so hypocritical. But it's not surprising to me that they would be hypocritical like this, because they have no morals. They don't believe in right and wrong. So anything that if it's a lie, if it's a twisting of the truth, they don't care, because them concepts are null and void to them. But let's go on. Elder maintained that black Americans benefited, quote, a strong belief in the values of America following the American Civil War, including high rates of marriage and commensurate low rates of divorce, entrepreneurship, Christian faith, and patriotism. And let me say this, he's absolutely right about that. I've studied that history. He's absolutely right. Blacks have benefited from these concepts and these American values. The Black Lives Matter operation, he added, amounts to, quote, a very assault on what made black people survive and thrive after slavery. And what's interesting, too, about this, too, is that even during slavery, I found this out from Walter Williams, which I may do a review of one of his books in the future. He passed about several years ago. African-American economist, well known, but not as known as Thomas Sowell. He was kind of like overblown by Thomas Sowell by the media, but that's another story. And he mentioned he mentioned a section in one of his books, how that blacks, or a small amount of blacks, but they were doing this, blacks even during slavery were allowed to be entrepreneurs. Even during slavery in the Deep South, and even in the North were allowed to own businesses. They had to get a certain portion of the money to their masters, but some of these blacks during slavery days in the South and the North were allowed to become entrepreneurs because the hunger and the drive for capitalism was so great that they was willing to work all day in the fields. And then after they would finish working all day in the fields, they would go out into midnight and work with the permission of their masters somewhere else. This was called self-hire. Earn money, give a portion of that money to their masters, and then eventually buy it was buy their freedom. It was just awesome when I found out about that. Quite a few stories about it, but that just goes to show you that capitalism and many of the American values helped black people not only after slavery, but to some extent during slavery. Let's go on. Elder warned that high rates of single parenthood among blacks in recent decades relative to early American history is predictive of a broader national trend of increasing family collapse. Women have been incentivized to marry the government, and men have been incentivized to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. In other words, they're being encouraged to do this. Women are being encouraged to marry the government. Men are being encouraged to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And that's not just a fact in the black community, he observed. Now, 25% of white kids are born outside of wedlock. 40% of all American kids are now born outside of wedlock, something that would not be possible if not for our subsidization of slovenly behavior. He goes on to say, laws, regulations, and institutional policies marketed as remedial measures against racism undermine the welfare demographic groups framed as beneficiaries of such policies, Elder shared. Slavery and Jim Crow are the excuse for a lot of white liberals to enact policies that have hurt the very people that they claim to care about, he stated. Let me say this about that. This is crazy because here's what's interesting about why white liberals use slavery and Jim Crow as an excuse to enact these policies. I believe the reason why white liberals use this as an excuse to enact these policies is because it works. It isn't so much that they don't have another argument, because they know that the other argument is just as valid as their argument that slavery and Jim Crow are the reason why black people are so messed up. So they use that argument. They use that argument because, unfortunately, that argument works. So many blacks fall for it time and time and time and time and time again. And that's why myself and people like Larry Elder and Anthony Brown Logan and Brandon T. Tatum and Patricia Dixon and all these other people are trying to open the eyes of so many African Americans against this lie that's being enacted. That's why we do what we do. There it says, my friend, the late Walter Williams, once wrote a column where he issued a proclamation, a pardon for white people, so they would stop doing things that were antithetical to the best interests of black people, most notably the welfare state, race-based preferences, set-asides, and affirmative action. Elder highlights the news media's selective hyping and suppression of incidents of violent crime based on racial criteria of suspects and victims. Absolutely. And Larry Elder says, it is a filthy, disgusting lie that America is systemically racist and the police are engaging in systemic racism, he held. And as you all know, I just did a review on a book review on this very same concept. Just the other day, there were 3 Arkansas cops beating the stuffings out of a white suspect. It was a one-day story. Nobody cared. They kneeled on him. They pounded him. We're talking about 3 people beating the crap out of this guy, and it was a one-day story. Nobody cared. Why? Because the suspect was the wrong race. Had he been a black guy, we'd know his name. The cops would be flashed all over the newspaper. They'd be prosecuted, and he's absolutely right about it. Larry Elder's absolutely right about it. We'd know his name. They'd be talking about chanting his name. Say his name, and chanting all this other stupid stuff. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Elder concluded by emphasizing the partisan political aspects of the Black Lives Matter campaign and enterprise. He says, this is just such a fraud done by the Democrats, yep, the Democrats, in order to make sure black people are angry and pissed off. So they pull the lever to the tune of 90 to 95% for Democrats every 4 years for the presidency, he added. He's absolutely right about that. This kind of stuff happens every 4 years. And I didn't really pay much attention to it when I wasn't politically involved. I ain't paying enough attention to that. But now that I'm politically involved, now I see it happens every 4 years. It happens all the time. We start coming around election. The first thing Democrats start pooping and hollering about is systemic racism and blacks, this, black. And it's interesting to me because they were the very party that supported slavery, didn't want to get rid of slavery. They were the very party that the KKK came from and they supported. And they were the very party that created the Jim Crow laws in the Deep South. And also in the North, when you had Democratic politicians and so forth in the North, they created screwy, messed up situations in the inner city because of their policies. They've been the destruction of black people from day one. But trying to tell black people this is like trying to tell Satan that Jesus loves them and he gonna go to heaven. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Elder hosts a radio program, an internet-based show, and that's the end of that article right there. But I absolutely agree with Larry Elder there. I admire Larry Elder. He's always giving the facts, always getting data. I'm gonna tell you one thing about Larry Elder. Don't ever get into a argument with him because he will go off on you with facts and data and tear you apart. I've seen him get fired. Don't ever get him getting fired up because he can get fired up. He can get fired up. But yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen Uncle Tom 2. I haven't seen this one. I've seen the first one, as I said earlier in this video. I've seen the first Uncle Tom. It was excellent. I think it came out in 2020. It was excellent. Excellent show about black conservatives and the things that they have to deal with, the things that they go through. And I really, really admired it. And I think that this second one, I was told by, I think Anthony Brown Logan got a copy of it and he was able to review it. And he said it was great. It talks about Marxism. It talks about communism. And I'm glad that Anthony Brown Logan said it. It talks about these issues because this is something that I've been talking about from the very beginning when I started my channel, that would be something that I would be emphasizing a lot about how communism and Marxism and socialism have infiltrated our government, infiltrated our entertainment industry, infiltrated our school systems, infiltrated the churches and religions of this country for the purpose of completely dismantling and destroying America and rebuilding it again into a communist state. That's what I've been talking about from day one. And I'm glad that this movie here, which I'm definitely going to see, this documentary, second part of the documentary, I'm definitely going to see, deals with these issues. So, yeah, I agree with everything that Larry Elder said here. This is something that happens every time, and it's a challenge every 4 years, and it's a challenge trying to get black people to see that, hey, you're being used. You're being used like you were during slavery. They're doing the same thing. They're just doing it in a different method. And people think that this is something you can just brush off. Oh, that's just political issues. Man, come on. Stop it. There's no such thing as politics over here and everything else over here. We can say pop culture is here and politics is here. Okay, but guess what these Democrats and these Marxists and communists have done is they have infiltrated the pop culture in music, movies, entertainment, the school system. They have infiltrated the pop culture, something that the conservatives and Republicans have failed to do. And that's one of the reasons why conservatives and Republicans cannot reach the masses, because people like to feel good. They like to be entertained. And the left knows that. So they've infiltrated the entertainment industry in order to get at the minds of the people. It ain't about merely entertainment, especially recently. It's about pushing an agenda. But what's the best way to do that? Do that in the areas where people feel good, where they want to feel good. You know, while they're feeling good, you can brainwash them with false ideology. You can brainwash them with Marxism and communism and socialism, and they not even know about it. Next thing you know, they're accepting socialism as the viable solution to the American economics. How did that happen? Gee, because they were smart enough to know to infiltrate the mainstream areas, to infiltrate the entertainment industry, or what we know as the pop culture. This is what's been going on, man. So it's time for conservatives to really, really, really look into this much deeper. And it's time for African Americans and all Americans, for this matter, to wake up and see what's going on. Because it's not just politics. Okay, it's not politics here and pop culture and everything else here. A lot of what happens in politics, the decisions they make up there, affects all of us. And that the only way that we as American people on all sides and all races and ethnicities and religions is be informed about our government, informed about politics, informed about civic duties, and informed about our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and know these things so that we can know how to fight back. You fight back, the best way to fight back is through knowledge. It isn't through guns and all that. It's through knowledge and understanding and comprehension. Now, unfortunately, if it comes to that, I hope it doesn't come to that with guns and stuff like that. But it may come to that. Hopefully it doesn't. But the best way right now is through knowledge and understanding. So that's what I wanted to say about that. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. God bless you all. See you again.